24 different players that will change your outcome in week 5 of fantasy football. Players you should be starting and players you should be sitting. We're going to click through 24 of them, 12 starts and 12 sits at each position. We're going to start with the quarterbacks, work our way down to the tight ends. So Cameron, I'll have you kick us off here. Who is your quarterback start of the week?
Jordan Love, and he gets to play the Rams, so that's a big reason for it. Rams are allowing the 12th most passing yards per game, highest pass yards per attempt, and they've been worst in pressuring the quarterback, allowing over 3 seconds per drop back to quarterbacks before they're pressured. And they're also giving up the 5th most passing touchdowns and fantasy points to quarterbacks. Now, I know Jordan Love's only played 2 games this season, but in those 2 games, he's averaging 24 fantasy points a game, 320 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. We saw it in the second half of that Minnesota game where he finally looked comfortable, where he was finally able to feel like he could move on that knee, where he was really hitting wide receivers in stride. And he kind of lit up that Minnesota defense that second half of the game. And that's why he was able to put up close to 30 fantasy points last week. So I would feel confident with Jordan Love, especially in this matchup.
Yeah, I think you named it. It wasn't great to start out the game, but the second half of the game, he was really ripping it. Ty, you're lowest on Jordan Love this week. Any particular reason for that?
Just because I think a lot of what we saw last week was just because he threw the ball 54 times. So if he's anywhere in the 30s, can he, still throw 4 touchdowns? Absolutely. I just am, my ranking just kind of says I'm expecting Green Bay to be maybe a little more run heavy in this game because that's where this Rams defense is the weakest. But that being said, I'm a huge fan of Jordan Love this week because again, the matchup is just so good.
Yeah, I have Jordan Love ranked the highest, but I am also a big Josh Jacobs advocate this week. I think this is the first time we see him really get on track this year. I mean, he had 153 yards against the Colts in week 2, but we have yet to see him have that big fantasy week. So yeah, I love Jordan Love this week. I think he's a great option against the Rams, but Ty, I'm going to come right back to you. Who is your quarterback start of the week?
Brock Purdy going up against the Arizona Cardinals, and the Niners offense this week could literally score 50 points. They are the highest point total matchup of the week at 49.5. The Niners are 7.5 point favorites. So, okay, they're maybe not going to score 50 points, but they're certainly going to score a lot. And you look at the last 4 matchups between San Francisco and Arizona, the Niners are averaging 39 points a game. They've gone 38, 38, 35, 45. And in Brock Purdy's 3 starts against the Cardinals in his career, he averages 22.3 fantasy points a game, 234 yards a game, and he has 8 total passing touchdowns, 2 games with 3 and 4. And this year, Arizona's in the top half of teams in passing yards allowed. So I'm expecting this Niners team to put up a ton of points because if they do, Brock Purdy is going to put up some serious fantasy points this week.
My only downfall here is that I think I don't want to get ahead of ourselves here, but I think Jordan Mason could have a Derrick Henry against the Bills kind of week where it's like 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, granted, Brock Purdy could still, complete 18 passes for 240 yards along the way for 2 touchdowns and still give you a fantasy relevant day, but Cameron, where are you at on Brock Purdy? You're the lowest, but then again, we're all kind of clumped together between the quarterback 7 and 9.
Yeah, I think the worry when you were looking at the schedule before the season started was this could be a game that just gets away from Arizona. The San Francisco just, is a cakewalk for them. But other than last week, Arizona's played teams tough, right? They took Buffalo 34-28. They had Detroit 20-13. They blew out the Rams 41-10. So I think this is going to be another game where the 49ers have to put up points in this one, which again bodes well for Brock Purdy. I almost pivoted right before we started to Brock Purdy, and I looked at our sheet and Ty had already claimed him as the start of the week, so I was unable to. So I'm right with you, Ty. Even though my ranking says quarterback 9, I still think Brock Purdy is a great start this week.
Yeah, Brock Purdy against Arizona. You can definitely fire him up as a top 10 option this week. My quarterback start of the week is also a top 10 option for me. Is Justin Fields against the Dallas Cowboys. Now, the film last week against the Colts was not necessarily great. I'm not going to back that. But when you look at this Dallas defense, they are going to be without DeMarcus Lawrence for sure, and they're likely going to be without Micah Parsons as well. And we saw what Lamar Jackson did against this Dallas defense in week 3. He only completed 12 passes for 182 yards. I don't want Justin Fields' arm in this game. I want his 14 rushes for 87 yards and a score that Lamar Jackson had against his Dallas Cowboys defense. That he ended up racking up 26 fantasy points on the week back in week 3. So again, not too invested in his arm. I want the rushing upside against a banged up Mike Zimmer defense where, look, if he's going to continue to just keep bringing pressure, that's just more scramble opportunities for Justin Fields. So I am firing up Justin Fields as a top 10 option, even though the film wasn't great last week. I don't care about Justin Fields here from a football perspective. I think he can escape this game just fine. And then maybe you have a discussion next week about whether it's him or Russell Wilson for week 6. But for now, I'm rolling him out there against a banged up Cowboys defense.
Yeah, I mean, he was the quarterback 1 last week. So, I don't hate that, throwing over 300 passing yards against the Colts. So he showed at least something, right? He's showing, hey, I can go out there. That was his first game with over 300 passing yards in almost 3 years. So, at least he's doing something there. And then whenever you can add 55 rushing yards for 2 touchdowns on the ground, that's going to be a big plus. And like you said, if you don't got Micah Parsons or DeMarcus Lawrence, that's a real possibility in this one.
Right. And I think you can, I know Najee Harris is somewhat of a factor you could consider here, but let's just be honest. Najee really hasn't looked that great this year. I mean, it's the same story for Najee, right? The first 6-7 weeks of the season, you're like, why the frick did I draft this guy? And that's where Justin Fields can come into play here, where I think he could end up scarfing. If they get in the red zone, he could scarf a few of those touchdowns instead of them falling to Najee Harris. Ty, where do you lie on Justin Fields this week?
I like him as a sneaky start as well this week. Yeah, the Dallas matchup, when you think about it, it doesn't sound great for a quarterback like Justin Fields, but from the pressure standpoint, if Zimmer's going to blitz, Fields can escape, and that just even more fantasy points. I think the other point, too, you kind of touched on it with Najee. Jalen Warren missed practice on Wednesday, and Cordero Patterson himself is banged up. So there may be an extra need for Justin Fields to use his legs in this game. And because of that, yeah, like definitely fire up Justin Fields.
Before we move on to our quarterback sits of the week, we got to talk to the 7% out there. I'm changing it up this week. We are so grateful for the 7% of you that are already subscribed to our channel, that continuously watch our content. We see you commenting. A few even popped in on the last video like, I just subscribed. I joined the 7%. I'm not a part of the 93 anymore. So make sure you're part of the 7%. Make sure you're part of the fellowship. All right. Hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on those notifications so you know when all of our newest videos are up. Spitting right now. If you're listening to our audio feed as well, make sure you're subscribed over there as well. Leave us a nice little review. We love hearing from you all and your thoughts on our show. Quarterback sits of the week. Cameron, who is yours?
Mine's Sam Darnold, and I really do hate saying this, but the dude's a quarterback 4 on the year, so it's not like this is a guy who's a fringe player anymore. There's a lot of people who are looking to fire him up, but unfortunately he's playing the Jets, who are allowing 128 passing yards per game, which is the second best in the NFL right now. They're all also only allowing 4.2 yards per attempt, which is the best in the NFL, and only 8.9 fantasy points per game to the quarterback position. Now, I want to be fair. I understand that they have played Brock Purdy, Jacoby Brissett, Will Levis, and Bo Nix. So it's not like they've seen any elite quarterbacks as of now, but they are locking these guys down. And the thing that worries me is that 54% of Darnold's fantasy points this season so far have come from touchdowns. And the Jets have only allowed 2 passing touchdowns on the season. We know they have Sauce Gardner. We know they have a lockdown secondary. So if Darnold's only able to find the end zone one time, all of a sudden, we're just not seeing that same 20-point week that you've grown accustomed to, not even an 18 or 16-point week. So that's where it can be disappointing, where he can play good NFL football, but if he doesn't find the end zone, then all of a sudden you're just not seeing it, and I just don't want to test that this week against the New York Jets.
In London, too. That's the other thing I want to note about this game. In London, I don't want to just write off a quarterback play because it's overseas and it's how long a travel. Like I don't really want to write it away because of that, but that's always something I'm taking into consideration here when I'm looking at how these games will shake out. Will they just rely on the running backs, or will Sam Darnold need to use his arm here? But I agree. I'm not the biggest Sam Darnold advocate this week. You and I both have him at quarterback 15, though, Ty. Is he still a fringe streaming option for you, or is it like a quarterback 15, but I'm definitely pessimistic?
I'm somewhere in between. Because on one hand, you know that this Minnesota offense is just clicking right now, and they are going through teams like no tomorrow. That being said, though, this Jets defense is just a completely different beast than Green Bay, Houston, San Francisco, or the Giants. So, yeah, like 15 feels about right because it's like if you believe enough in Sam Darnold so far against a Jets defense as good as they have been so far, you could start him. I'm just more so like, oh man, like I want to trust it because Skull, but like I don't know. The Jets defense does scare me a little bit.
Yeah, mine is definitely like, yeah, I'm gonna slot him here. It's mostly because I would just rather play him over the other 10 quarterbacks I have ranked after him. But I wouldn't be surprised, if the floor falls out from underneath him against the Jets this week overseas, and maybe not even falls out from underneath him, but we just see more Aaron Jones in this game. We see we just see less of Sam Darnold's arm. It wouldn't surprise me if he's just not as sharp as he has been through the first 4 weeks in this game. I'll come right back to you, Ty. You're going a little bit more bold here with your quarterback sit of the week. Who is it?
It's Patrick Mahomes. Yeah, we're going there. The thing is, it's the name that sounds bold. You're right, calling Mahomes a sit, but when you look at what he's been doing over the last 13 regular season games, I beg to differ that it's actually kind of it's a pretty apparent sit, in my opinion. Again, in his last 13 regular season games, we're going back to week 8 of last year. He's averaging 15.4 fantasy points per game. He has one game with 20, and the next highest in that span of games, 17.8. No Rashee Rice either in this game. So things are going to be changing in this Kansas City offense. He's going to be throwing to obviously Travis Kelce, but it's going to be some kind of, I don't even want to call it a rotation. It's going to be a mix of Juju Smith-Schuster and Justin Watson and who is Xavier Worthy. Like, I'm not a fan of just who he's throwing to, and then you add in the Saints matchup on top of it. The Saints are allowing the fourth fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks, and they've only allowed one passing touchdown. They are very good. They haven't allowed more than 19 points in a game this year, and they've played Dallas, and they've played Philly. So I just, there's too many moving pieces to this equation for Mahomes to give me any kind of confidence. Now, that being said, I completely get like not sitting Mahomes just because of where you drafted him. We just talked about Sam Darnold. I would probably still play Mahomes over Darnold, but I just don't feel great about starting Mahomes at this point.
So this is the point where I would say something here and transition to Cameron, but instead we're going to play Ty's favorite name. We're going to play a name game because I think this is the only way we can have a discussion around Patrick Mahomes this week. If you're going to call him a sit when he's still, a top 12 option here for both Cam and I, and like right on the fringe of that for you, I think it's worth playing a name game here to help the people understand like which direction are you looking, but how far are Cam and I willing to go to start players who are Patrick Mahomes this week. We all would play Brock Purdy over Patrick Mahomes this week.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Justin Fields, my start of the week. Would you rather play him over Mahomes?
Yep.
Yeah, barely, but yeah.
Barely for me as well. I have them 2 spots apart. Anthony Richardson, if he's active this week, would you play him against Jacksonville over Mahomes?
Yes.
I would.
I would not.
Is that an anti-Anthony Richardson take or a pro Patrick Mahomes take?
that's an anti-Richardson take. And part of it is the hip injury too, right? Where it's like if there's any questions around that going into this game and he's starting, all it takes is one fall and one hit for him to be knocked out of the game, right? So
Sure.
it's not necessarily like I think he sucks. It's a great matchup against Jacksonville. It's more of I'll just take the safety that I know I'll likely get with Mahomes this week. Baker Mayfield.
Baker.
I have Mahomes slightly higher, but I do feel like Baker actually has the higher ceiling in this one. So I don't know. I might end up rolling Baker when it comes down to it on Thursday night.
I do have Baker ranked ahead of Mahomes this week. I'd be willing to roll out Baker potentially. Dak Prescott.
Dak.
I'm going Mahomes, so
I've got Dak one spot ahead of Mahomes. Last name I'll throw out here. Geno Smith, the league leader in passing yards right now.
That one feels I'm the same as I was on Baker for that one. I think that one's really close. I think I still lean Mahomes, but I could easily change my mind come Sunday.
Yep, same here.
I think I'm going to safely lean Mahomes in that one. I don't think I could, like, in my right mind. I don't know if I can make it. Here's what I'm worried about. The New York Giants run defense has looked fine this year. What if Ken Walker just puts up another multi-touchdown game? And it's just like all Ken Walker, who's just looked like an absolute freak this year. Like, that's my biggest worry there, is that they're just not going to need to toss the rock as much. We'll put a ball on Mahomes there. Look, mine isn't as fun. Mine isn't as sexy. I honestly don't hate the matchup for him either. But my quarterback sit of the week is Caleb Williams of the Chicago Bears. Now, I don't hate the matchup. He gets the Panthers this week, right? They're giving up the 10th most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks this year. They've given up 9 passing touchdowns, which is the second most. But what this comes down to for me, I want nothing to do with Shane Waldron right now. Shane Waldron is the new Arthur Smith, right? Like, are they going to continue establishing themselves as this downhill team like they did week 4 against the Rams? Are they going to win by Caleb's arm in a potential shootout with the Panthers? What this comes down to is that the guy has only given me one game with more than 11.5 fantasy points this year. So I see no chance in taking the chance on streaming him this week with how much inconsistencies there are in this offense. You would have to do a decent amount for me to fire up Caleb Williams this week. I just want nothing to do with him if Shane Waldron's going to continue to run this offense in such an unpredictable way.
Yeah, it's tough to try and fire him up in a game where you know they're going to want to continue to run the ball because the Panthers just haven't been good against the run for 2 years now. I just don't know what to do with Caleb, so it's kind of one of those things where I'm more like, all right, I just don't want anything to do with it. Because you understand the talent. He's kind of like the Kmart Patrick Mahomes right now. You know that the talent's there, but you just haven't seen it on the fantasy. And obviously, you know, he's nowhere near Mahomes' level yet, but I think he could have games where he's better for the NFL right now than he is for fantasy for at least a little bit. So I'm with you. I'm staying away from Caleb Williams this week.
Ty, you staying away from Caleb?
Yeah. There's nothing that you can trust about this Bears offense. Like, we thought DJ Moore had a great matchup, and then it turned into the DeAndre Swift career game. Like, there's no way of knowing, of predicting, like, who's going to have the good week. We don't even know, again, if it's going to be Roschon Johnson actually this game, right? Like, there are too many moving pieces again in the Caleb Williams equation to have any kind of trust in him.
Let's move on to the running backs now, fellas. Our start and sit running backs of the week. Cameron, who's your running back start of the week?
Jordan Mason, and I know some of you are thinking this is just cheating, Cameron. At this point, we should know Jordan Mason's legit. He's a top 3 running back for each of us this week. I find it funny because I'm pretty sure all my starts, I might be except for my wide receiver, I might be the lowest out of all 3 of us on all of my starts. But that's besides the fact. He is still only started in 80% of leagues right now on Sleeper, which is just wild to me that at this point, a guy who hasn't seen less than 19 attempts, who hasn't seen less than 75 rush yards in a game, is still only 80% started with what we've seen from the running back position so far this season. And then he's playing Arizona, who's allowing the 5th most rush yards per game and tied for allowing the most rushing touchdowns this season. And I know some people might be like, oh, but Debo's fully back and Kittle's back. The dudes look better when Debo and Kittle are in the game because it just opens up the field more. He's going to get the attempts no matter if they're in there or not. So this is your push to make sure that he's in your lineup now and every single week until Christian McCaffrey comes back.
I mean, this is just a case of like Jordan Mason could be the overall running back one on the week. I already said he could have a Derrick Henry against the Bills on Sunday Night Football kind of week, right? The Cardinals, they are giving up 178 rushing yards per game over the last 2 weeks. I mean, David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs both top 80 rushing yards. This is a guy where he could easily go for 202 this week. I wouldn't be surprised in the least. I shouldn't say easily, but if that's what his stat line is at the end of the week, I'd be like, yeah, because the 49ers are just going to run the football down their throats. Anything you want to add on top of that, Ty? He's your overall running back one on the week. I don't think there's probably much you can add.
Nope. I mean, all the points that I made about Brock Purdy and this Niners team going up against Arizona and how bad of a run defense Arizona has, why can't the guy feast?
I'll come right back to you then. Who's your running back start of the week?
My running back start is Chuba Hubbard going up against the Chicago Bears. No Jonathan Brooks just yet, so we are going to get yet another game of Chuba Hubbard. And the guy has back-to-back weeks with 100 yards rushing, and he has 3 weeks in a row of 4 or more receptions. You like that one, Cam? 3 weeks.
I did like that one. I like that one a lot. 3.
Even though Chicago's defense has been playing pretty well this year, they are getting torched on the ground. At least in the last 2 weeks, they're allowing the 5th most rushing yards. They gave up 100 to Jonathan Taylor. They gave up 94 to Kyron Williams with no Cooper Kupp or Puka Nacua in that offense. And they gave up 82 to Tony Pollard in week 1. So I'm expecting Carolina, again, we know that Dave Canales likes to be a bit stubborn with the run. I mean, Chuba Hubbard has gone for 21 carries and 18 carries in the last 2 weeks as well. Yeah, like you should fire up Chuba Hubbard this week. I don't overthink this one. Yeah, again, you think the Bears defense is going to be a tough game. They have been leaking rushing yards this year.
Saquon Barkley, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, J.K. Dobbins, Tony Pollard, all on bye this week. Kind of by process of elimination, this elevates Chuba into running back 2 status for me. But Cameron, we can't deny, he's looked phenomenal over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's kind of ride the hot hand. If you've got him, you're still holding on to him. You only got a certain amount of weeks that you're going to be able to start him anyway before Jonathan Brooks comes back. So why aren't you starting him when he's got this kind of matchup right now? And like you said, Ty, the Chicago run defense has just been leaky. And since Andy Dalton's coming into the fold for this Panthers team, they've looked completely different than they did the first 2 weeks. They're putting up points, they're moving up and down the field. And you've seen that with two straight 20-point performances from Hubbard.
My running back start of the week, I know I kind of dogged him on our Panic Meter show earlier this week, but my start of the week is Ramondre Stevenson at the running back position. I know it feels gross, but look, if the Patriots can hang around in football games, they're going to run the football. That's what we saw in weeks 1 and 2 when Ramondre was given 20 plus attempts, right? Miami, they have been run on at the 3rd highest rate in the league this year. This team cannot defend the run. They are giving up over 110 rushing yards per game to running backs. I have to believe if the Patriots don't want to put the ball in Jacoby Brissett's hands, they absolutely won't. He's not doing anything to win you ball games right now. So for me, this is a big volume day for Ramondre against a Dolphins offense that's just sputtering right now. And if you don't have to pass to keep up with them, why would you? Let's just feed Ramondre 20 plus times and let's get out of here with a grinded out ground and pound win.
Yeah, this Miami offense has shown you absolutely no reason to think that they're going to be on the field at all this game. It's just going to be 3 and out after 3 and out after 3 and out. And if they're going to do that, like you said, New England knows the only way we win games is if we run Ramondre. My only concern is that Jared Mayo did come out today and said they're looking into potentially starting Antonio Gibson because of Ramondre's fumbling issues that he's had over the last couple of weeks. So that would be my only concern, is that Antonio Gibson just gets more work than we've seen, but I think they're going to still rely on him this week against Miami.
See, and of course he comes out and says that after I am happily saying, yeah, I faded Ramondre all year. The 1 week I'm okay starting him is the week. Is the week he might not actually get the majority of the backfield touches. But that is something to track. That is a good observation. Ty, we can't deny though the matchup is good. If Ramondre is going to get the load, it appears to be a favorable script for him.
Absolutely. I mean, you can try to read into what Mayo said about Antonio Gibson getting the start. That doesn't mean that Ramondre Stevenson may not play the majority of snaps and get the majority of carries for the rest of the game, right? So in a game script that we are predicting to be pretty neutral, where there is no good coming with the New England passing attack, yeah, they're going to rely on Ramondre in this one.
Let's flip the script. Talk about running back sits of the week now. Cameron, we'll start with you. Who's your running back sit?
It's Zach Moss. He was the guy that I said that is a sell high as well. And part of it's because he plays in the AFC North. So he gets matchups like this against the Baltimore Ravens. Baltimore is allowing only 75 or oh my goodness. They're allowing only 57 yards per game. I can't read my own notes. I just typed this sentence so poorly. This is why you stay in school, kids, and do grammar. They are the only team allowing less than 75 yards per game at 57.8 yards. That's what I was trying to say. They have the lowest yards per rush in the NFL, allowed at 3.0 yards per carry, and they've only given up one carry over 10 yards all season long. Moss is yet to eclipse 60 rushing yards in a game and only played in 60% of snaps last week in a game they were behind. I got a feeling they're going to be behind in this game because it really looks like this Baltimore offense has hit its groove, and they're going to keep Cincinnati off the field with the amount of times they're going to run it with Derrick Henry and with Lamar Jackson. So if you really have a defense that's going to be really good against the run, and then their offense is going to keep your offense off the field, it just doesn't feel like a great week for your starting running back.
And I don't like to predict shootouts in AFC North matchups, but I find it hard to believe the Ravens aren't going to have a hard time running the ball against the Cincinnati Bengals, because what have they come out and done the last few weeks? Literally dominated teams on the ground. But then if you can't run on the Ravens, you can certainly pass on them this year. I mean, they have been getting exposed in the secondary, which falls right into the hands of Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, etc., where you're not going to be running the ball up the gut with Zach Moss to chew up clock. Ty, I'm not even going to ask for your opinion on Zach Moss, because your running back sit just comes from the exact same team.
Yeah. Don't start Chase Brown for literally the exact same reason. The matchup is brutal. What gave him the relevancy last week was that he got the goal line carries because he scored 2 rushing touchdowns. But what hasn't changed is that Zach Moss has been getting the 2-minute snaps. So, and I should say the pass catching situations, that's going to Zach Moss still. So you need him to continue getting the goal line carries, and that's just been rotating throughout the year so far. So yeah, short and sweet. Don't start either Bengals running backs this week.
It's fun to see some fireworks from Chase Brown. Fun little firecracker week. I think this is kind of what we were expecting, though, coming into the year, is if you get a good matchup, you can probably slot him in as a flex play or a desperate running back too in deeper leagues if you need him. But for Chase Brown, this is not the matchup you want to start him in, especially when Zach Moss is still getting his share of the work too. I'm gonna get us off the Bengals and the Ravens game, but I am gonna go back to a game that I've already talked about. My running back sit of the week is going to be Rico Dowdle of the Dallas Cowboys. Now, last week, you got the Giants. It was kind of a confusing week for Rico Dowdle, because as you're watching the film on the screen here, there's some areas where I'm like, Dowdle, you could have just, there's a different hole or a different cutback you could have had here. But honestly, Rico last week, he was bailed out by a 15-yard receiving touchdown. Now you get the Steelers, who have given up the 5th fewest fantasy points per game to running backs this year, the 3rd fewest rushing yards per game as well. I just even think in our first round of buys, you can find better options than Rico Dowdle in this matchup. It's not that Rico isn't going to be the lead back. It's not that I think that Zeke is going to continue to take work. I also think like sneakily we're kind of like underrating Hunter Luepke of like how much he's been on the field, how much receiving work he's been getting too. I just don't have much interest in starting any Dallas Cowboys running back against Pittsburgh Steelers defense, especially with how poorly the Dallas offensive line has been playing as well.
Yeah, and this backfield, I think, is, like you said, is just close enough to 50-50 where I just don't want to mess with it yet. Where even if it is a Rico Dowdle game, what we maybe see 13 rush attempts.
Yeah.
Like that feels like the ceiling for him as of right now. Steelers have been playing great on defense. That's the reason they started out 3-0. So I just don't want anything to do with it, even in a week where we do have a lot of buys.
Right. And that's the only reason why I'm bringing up Rico Dowdle as a sit here this week, because I think when you see 13.1 fantasy points, you think, could I slide him in this week when I'm without a Jahmyr Gibbs, a Saquon Barkley? I mean, he's my running back 28, but again, this is very similar to Sam Darnold. There's no upside here to be had with Rico Dowdle this week. It's just kind of like, I don't know, could he stumble forward for 45 yards and catch 2 passes this week? Sure. But that's not going to get you anything higher than, the running back 28 at most this week. You out on Rico Dowdle as well, Ty? You and Cam both have him at running back 31.
Yep. I mean, the excuse me, the 13 fantasy point week from Rico last week came from his receiving touchdown that could have been called back for holding. They picked up the flag, right? Like we were that close from going from a 13-point week just down to a 7-point week. So there's nothing going good. There's nothing worth investing in with this Dallas Cowboys backfield at the moment. And the matchup just should tell you don't trust it.
All right, fellas, we're halfway through our starts and sits. Let's take a quick break. We'll be back with the wide receivers and tight ends. Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100. Alrighty, we are back. We have covered our quarterback and running back starts and sits of the week. We're on to the pass catchers now, fellas. Let's start with the wide receivers. And with you, Cameron, who's your wide receiver start of the week?
I'm going to Brian Thomas, and I'm just kind of sticking with some of our buys and sells from last week. Zach Moss was a sell, so I have him as a sit. Brian Thomas was Ty's buy, so I have him as a start this week. And it's got a lot to do with the fact that he's playing the Indianapolis Colts this week, who are allowing the 7th most yards to quarterbacks, while also being bottom 10 or allowing the 10th most yards per attempt, passing touchdowns, and time to throw. I'm just struggling to get my stuff out.
Oh man,
well, that's all right. That's all right.
Get this Brian man Thomas, some glasses.
Brian Thomas, they're brutal. I'm already struggling. Now you're not even allowing me to get through my stuff. This is rough. But Brian Thomas, last week Ty said this might have been the breakout week for Brian Thomas because he had 6 receptions on 9 targets, 86 yards and a touchdown. Should have had another touchdown if, Trevor Lawrence isn't brutal out there. But I think this is, the sign of Brian Thomas is going to be in your lineup every single week moving forward. So just hop on the train before you've already missed 3 weeks of him putting up great fantasy performances one after another.
Yeah, I love Brian Thomas this week. I mean, we're talking about a guy who, correct me if I'm wrong, wide receiver 12 on the season right now. I might be mistaken. He's been insanely good this year, though. I honestly think my ranking of wide receiver 21 is a little bit too low. I love him in a matchup with the Colts this week.
Wide receiver 14 on the season.
14. Okay, I was two above there, but I knew he was in that top 15 range. So yeah, I'm thinking my ranking of wide receiver 21 is a little bit too low against the Colts here. Ty, you outside of your top 24 wide receivers, why is that?
Well, because the guy's the wide receiver 20 in points per game. So there's that aspect. That should make you feel better about your wide receiver 21 ranking there, Lucas. But I think for me, I need to just see another week before I can confidently start him as a wide receiver 2. I still think he's startable as a wide receiver 3 or as a flex play. The downfield usage does concern me a little bit, that if it's not hitting, Brian Thomas could not hit as well. So even though, again, like I said, on our trades episode, Cam mentioned it, the breakout could have happened last week. But at the same time, this Jacksonville offense is not consistent, is not performing right now. So for all we know, they could only put up maybe 14 points against an Indy defense when the matchup is this good.
I won't go against anything you said there. I just love the matchup too much for Brian Thomas Jr. And I think he is just so clearly the wide receiver 1 in this offense that he should be in all lineups at this point as bare minimum a flex option, if not a wide receiver 2. But I'll come right back to you, Ty. Who's your wide receiver start of the week?
Stephon Diggs. Another kind of Jordan Mason-esque player where you're like, no duh, like I'm playing Stephon Diggs. I'm just telling you, hey, revenge game alert. And if you thought the Minnesota game was a revenge game, brother, this is the biggest revenge game you could ever dream of for Stephon Diggs. This also plays into the role that Diggs has in this Houston offense, right, going up against Buffalo, that are blitzing at the 8th highest rate in the league. They have the 13th highest pressure rate as well. Needing to get the ball out quick, very similar to the Vikings game, just benefits Diggs as the guy that just has the lowest depth of target of the receivers on this team. So yes, even with Tank Dell likely playing this week, I'm not scared off by Diggs by one bit. I've got him as a fringe wide receiver 1, just because I think, again, revenge game, and with the matchup against the Bills, it just plays into the role that he has.
I think I've formulated an opinion around revenge games that it really doesn't matter unless if a player truly has dog in them, like Stephon Diggs. Like you actually got to give a crap about these revenge games. And I'm not saying every player doesn't, but like I feel like we write this narrative of revenge games for so many people, and then it's like, well, you actually didn't do that much. But like Diggs is a guy where it's like, he freaking cares about this game. But Cameron, you and I both have him at the wide receiver 18, just inside of our top 20 wide receivers. Any reason why he's not higher for you?
I'm just a little bit worried about playing this Bills offense or defense. They've given up less than 100 yards receiving to wide receivers in 3 out of 4 games so far. So that's kind of where my worry comes from. Obviously, last week against Buffalo, Buffalo didn't need to throw the ball and they trounced them. That Miami game, Tua gets knocked out. So there's been things that have happened that have kind of led to this, but I do think that this defense is playing really well. So that's the only reason I'm not quite so gung-ho like Ty is.
Ty, I got a bone to pick with you. You made Michael Pittman your sell on our trade targets episode.
Yeah, he did. Yesterday. Let's go.
Woo. I'm sorry. This is one where I'm like, you may as well chalk it up. You're going to get all the L comments in the world on the video next week. And I'm just going to point them right back to you because you forgot the fact that Michael Pittman Jr. plays the Jacksonville Jaguars this week. This man has feasted against the Jacksonville Jaguars for his career. He has scored 20 plus fantasy points in 4 of his last 5 games against the Jags. Now, it's not confirmed whether we actually get Anthony Richardson or Joe Flacco this week, but you know what? Frankly, if it's Joe Flacco under center, all the better, if you ask me. Jacksonville this year, they've given up the 5th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers, the 3rd most receiving yards allowed, and the 3rd most receptions. This is just such a smash spot for Michael Pittman Jr. for me. It's the matchup. It's the fact there's history here to show that he has done it. And if Joe Flacco is under center, he's going to be hunting for Michael Pittman Jr. We finally got the breakout game last week. I understand why you would want to sell high on the guy, but frankly, this matchup is just too good where if I acquired Michael Pittman Jr. in a trade, I would be looking to fire him up instantly this week. Yet, both of you have him outside of your top 24 wide receivers this week.
Yeah, that's because if Anthony Richardson does play, he's had 9 completions, 17 completions, and 10 completions in his only 3 complete games. In Michael Pittman's last 3 games against Jacksonville, he's had 13 receptions, 9 receptions, and 8 receptions. So unless the dude's seeing like an 80% target share this week, I just don't think he's going to see the same volume. That's the worry for me. That's why I'm pretty much out on Michael Pittman every single week.
Problem is, though, what you're not going to have Jonathan Taylor this week. Are you?
Maybe.
Are they going to have to rely on Anthony Richardson's? Assuming Anthony Richardson is that quarterback, are they going to have to rely on his arm more? Do you think there's going to be more designed runs? I know it's a maybe, but I would be shocked if Jonathan Taylor plays this week.
My worry is we kind of said the same thing last year, and then they gave Zach Moss 30 carries 2 weeks in a row. So I think they're okay relying on whoever's in the backfield.
On Trey Sermon. Evan Silva established the runs like he has a piano on his back. That's how he described how Trey Sermon runs. I thought that was pretty spot on. Ty, I know you just hate Michael Pittman, so I'll let you chime in with any negative thoughts on my perfectly crafted argument here.
A broken clock is right twice. So can it happen again? Sure. Yeah, he can have another good week. But I'm just telling you, like, the floor is just dangerously low with Michael Pittman because, to Cam's point, if your quarterback is only going to be completing 9 passes in a game, and Josh Downs has been getting a 30% or better target rate in his 2 games since coming back, how much can really go around for a guy like Michael Pittman Jr.?
You just wait when Michael Pittman's a top 10 wide receiver this week.
I see. I'm already mentally preparing for it. Like, I know it's going to happen at this point.
I mean, I do think it's valid. If Anthony Richardson is in, I am definitely a little bit more scared. Do not get me wrong, but I am leaning towards it being Joe Flacco. And if it's Joe Flacco as the starter, I think this is a great spot for Michael Pittman. Let's move on to wide receiver sits now. Cam, who's yours?
It's Zay Flowers. And funny enough, my main argument is around the Cincinnati run defense and how bad they are, because they are 8th, they're bottom 8 in yards per carry, and rush touchdowns this season. So you know what that means? That means we're going to see the exact same thing that we saw in weeks 3 and 4 from this Baltimore offense, where Lamar only had 15 and 18 pass attempts because they ran the crap out of the ball. That's what they're going to continue to do. We talked about this on the Panic episode with Zay Flowers of what should we do? What do we do with Zay Flowers? Like, is it going to get better? I don't think it's going to get better because I think the Ravens are going to lean into this identity. That's why they brought in Derrick Henry. That's what they've wanted to do all along. And now that they're able to do it, they're going to continue to do it because, like Lucas and Ty said when we were talking about Cincinnati, was this Ravens pass defense isn't good. It's just not good at all. So Cincinnati is going to throw the ball, so they're going to want to keep them off the field. And then the worry about Zay Flowers is he just doesn't get a lot of targets because the offense doesn't throw a lot. And his ADOT is 6.2 yards, which is 77th in the NFL right now. And he only has 4 receptions on the season that he caught further than 5 yards down the field. All he is around the line of scrimmage. And if you're not seeing a lot of targets, you just don't score a lot of fantasy points.
Wan'Dale Robinson or Zay Flowers this week? Wan'Dale Robinson is like the enigma of these short yardage wide receivers this year.
I will just spoil it for. I was going to say I'll spoil it. All of us have Wan'Dale ranked ahead of Zay Flowers this week.
That is true. I have Wan'Dale ranked 1 spot ahead of Zay Flowers this week. That's why I bring that up. Ty, you want to pile on to Zay Flowers here?
I've got Wan'Dale as a top 30 wide receiver. Zay Flowers is my wide receiver 31. That's all I need to say.
I'll come right back to you then. Who's your wide receiver sit of the week?
Jacoby Myers. I'm going to keep this one short and sweet as well. Yeah, he's the wide receiver 1 on the Raiders because even Adam Schefter, while we were recording this on Wednesday evening, tweeted that Devontae is not expected to play in week 5. So yeah, like Jacoby Myers, wide receiver 1. But if Pat Surtain is going to shadow a Raider this week, it's going to be Jacoby Myers. That's it.
And they can't run the football. So it's not like they can take any pressure off of Gardner Minshew. And granted, the Denver Broncos defense has looked better as the season progresses here. But golly, we know the Las Vegas Raiders cannot run the football despite their urgency around trying to run the football. They literally can't. Jacoby Myers, extremely low floor play this week. I assume you're in agreement here, Cameron.
Yeah, it's a bad run offense when Antonio Pierce is saying we might look to get Alexander Madison more touches. If your goal is to get Alexander Madison more touches, you're not running the ball well. And so, yeah, Pat Surtain has given up 87 yards on the season so far. So I would not be looking for Jacoby Myers to light it up in this one, that's for sure.
I'll throw out a little bit more of a sexy name to sit than Jacoby Myers this week. I'm still looking to sit Jalen Waddle. Hey, not a dig on you, Ty. I'm just saying, dig. Like we kind of breathe. I mean, look, you made the case. The appeal is there. Jacoby Myers is the wide receiver 1 here. He's going to be Gardner's favorite target in the wide receiver room at least. But it's not a false statement to say that Jalen Waddle is a more sexy name than Jacoby Myers. Again, look, this is very similar to Caleb Williams. I have no problem with the matchup this week. New England's giving up the 6th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. It's going to be Christian Gonzalez on Tyreek Hill this week. But you know what? If it ain't Tua under center, I got no interest in Waddle. Because if Waddle's just going to be a 4 for 34 kind of guy without Tua Tagovailoa, I just want to play higher upside guys who could get me, 7 points on one play instead of 4 plays, like a Rashid Shaheed, who could get me 13 fantasy points on one play instead of Jalen Waddle, who might not even get 13 fantasy points on the week. This is just simple. I'm avoiding the Miami Dolphins with Snoop Huntley under center, with Skylar Thompson under center, with, I don't care, Ryan Tannehill, if he comes out of retirement because Snoop Huntley can't figure out how to make this offense click. If it ain't Tua, I ain't playing Waddle. That's just where I'm at, even on a week full of eyes.
Yeah, Miami had 96 passing yards last week against Tennessee. I mean, Tennessee has played decent on defense, but 96 passing yards, and you got Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. They were so bad that people are talking about maybe we see a trade of Tyreek Hill back to the Chiefs. Tyreek Hill just signed a 3-year, $90 million extension with the Dolphins this year, and people are going, hey, maybe they send him back. That's how bad they've been over the last 2 weeks. So, yeah, if Tyreek, I think he's still are starting because he is like the second best wide receiver in the NFL right now. Maybe top 5 for sure. Whereas I think Jalen Wiles just gets the short end of the stick.
Ty, you've got your face in your hands here. You're disappointed about something.
Well, no. For the audio people that can't see the rankings that we gave for Waddle this week, Cam's wide receiver 33, Lucas is wide receiver 31, my wide receiver 37. And yet some people say, I can't start Jalen Waddle. Oh no, who is the real liar here? I'm just saying I was all the way out on Jalen Waddle before it was cool.
Well, whatever.
We're starting a Tyler and Lucas rivalry. We're gonna have to I'm gonna have to be the mediator. I'm gonna have to be the cool head of YouTube. That's crazy. All right, this could be a rough next week.
If you look, before we move on to everyone's favorite segment of the week, if you want more fantasy football advice, if you want more start sit help, you can head over to our Discord. We are about 23,000 strong and growing daily over there. We're about to hit discovery here in about a week, so instead of people clicking on the link and it not working on their phone, you're just going to be able to type in fantasy football fellas and find us over there. So make sure you join our Discord, start sit questions, waiver wire questions, trade questions, general fantasy football chat. If you just need a rant, you can join down in the description of the audio podcast or YouTube video you are listening to. All right, time for everyone's favorite segment of the week. Who the heck do I start at tight end this week? Because the tight ends have been all over this year. Cameron, who's your tight end start of the week? It feels like we're pulling. Honestly, this feels like we're just pulling names out of a hat for these tight end starts at this point.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Tucker Kraft. I keep calling him Luke Musgrave. That's how high profile of a tight end this is.
Can I expose you?
Yeah.
Your file in here. So running the film says Luke Musgrave. I almost didn't run it until you said that.
Yep.
But go ahead. Tell us about Tucker Luke Musgrave Kraft.
Yeah, and that's the issue. That was when I was looking up my stats for this. I kept looking up Luke Musgrave. And I'm like, this guy barely plays. I thought he had a good week against Minnesota. Nah, it's because I am looking up the wrong guy. It's worked out really well for us to chase volume at the tight end position in our starts. Just as Tyler with Hunter Henry. So I'm going to try it again here. With Christian Watson gone, there's just even more uncertainty in this Green Bay pass attack. Tucker Kraft, 86% of snaps, ran 48 routes last week on 54 pass attempts. He played well. He scored a touchdown, unfortunately, at the end of the game for the Packers, unfortunately. Fortunately for our Vikings, he did fumble and turn it over. But I think this Packers team is going to score points. We saw that in the end of last week. So I think Tucker Kraft's, he's going to see some sort of volume, and tight ends are just so brutal that it's like, if you can guarantee me that you can get, not guarantee, but if you look like you can get 4 catches for 40 yards, you're going to be a start.
That's right, Ty. I got your back too because I'm chasing volume for my tight end start of the week too. I'm gonna go with the Tyler Gronklin, baby. 6 targets, 8 targets in each of the last 2 weeks here for Tyler Conklin. Minnesota too. They are giving up the 5th most fantasy points to the tight end position this year. Look, if Garrett Wilson isn't going to have himself a day, we might see another decent day from Tyler Conklin, who is somehow a top 12 tight end across the board for us this week. So, Ty, we're here to avenge you. We got your back. Cameron and I are both chasing volume for our tight end starts of the week this week. I don't care that Tyler Conklin only had 14 receiving yards last week. If he's going to get the volume, at this point, what else are we chasing at the tight end position when guys like Mark Andrews and Kyle Pitts are giving you goose eggs?
8 targets, brother.
I just want to say how proud I am of you guys to come around on Tyler Conklin like this.
Oh, stop it. Switch it over.
To just throw Kobe Parkinson in the rearview mirror and then come around Tyler Conklin. I mean, I know it was difficult, but I am so glad that you guys have arrived.
Ty, you can go ahead and share your tight end start of the week because if you didn't take him, I was going to.
I really don't want to talk about my guy because my guy's probably the most obvious of the 3.
Yeah, he is.
It's David.
But yours is going to hit. That's the thing. Yours is definitely going to hit.
I mean, hey, look, I'm just going to take the low-hanging fruit. David Njoku going up against Washington. Now, on your apps on ESPN or on Sleeper, you may see the Washington little matchup in your lineup, and it might be red, and you're like, really? Washington? Let me just tell you, that is not correct because, yeah, while they are allowing the second fewest points on the year to tight ends, the 4th fewest receptions and yards, it's because they've faced literally nobody. They've faced the fewest targets to tight ends this year because they played Tampa, the Giants, Cincinnati, and Arizona with no Trey McBride. Yeah. Njoku got 5 targets before getting hurt against Dallas. Probably could have gotten more in garbage time. Yeah, David Njoku, if he plays this week, I should say. But if he plays, definitely put him into your lineup.
Yeah, Cleveland is throwing at the 2nd highest rate this year, second to only Dallas. And Deshaun Watson, 3rd in the league in pass attempts right now, only to Geno Smith and Dak Prescott.
Because they need it. They need him to.
So yeah, if Njoku plays, he is in your lineup this week. This is a perfectly fine matchup to play him in, especially if the Cleveland Browns are going to be throwing the ball at the rate at which they have been this year. Njoku is still going to get peppered with targets. Tight end sits of the week, Cameron. Let's start with you here. Yeah, we're here. Yep. We've gotten here. This is it.
I asked you guys if Mark Andrews was droppable last week. That's how far down I am on him.
Yeah.
And when you put up back-to-back goose eggs, I'm not starting him. He could put up 25 points, and I'm going to stand behind sitting him after back-to-back goose eggs this week. John Harbaugh came out and was like, "Hey, I know he's so great, and he's still an elite tight end, but sometimes it's just is the way our game plan is going to go." And it's the same as Zay Flowers. If Zay Flowers, who's been involved every single week, I don't think he's going to get involved this week. Why would I think that Mark Andrews is going to get involved? And if you guys are on YouTube watching the All 22, you're going to notice that I put up every single catch he has so far this season. And you want to know what? There isn't a single clip from either of the last 2 weeks because he put up back-to-back goose eggs. You cannot trust him at all. Younghoe Koo had more points in the fourth quarter last week than Mark Andrews has on the season right now. So, yeah, no, I'm not starting Mark Andrews under any circumstances.
Shout out Younghoe Koo, the real goat of fantasy football. And I'm still pissed at our dynasty league for choosing to get rid of kickers and making me drop Younghoe Koo. I held on to him as long as I could this offseason because that dude is the real goat. Ty, I don't mean to jump over you again, but I might as well because Isaiah Likely is my sit of the week. You can't trust the Baltimore Ravens pass catchers in any capacity right now. For a guy who had such a phenomenal week one, we mistakenly chased it because the tight ends were all terrible in week one. Injuries, whatever may have you. When we see a guy break out like that, is this the guy who's going to break out a tight end this year? It's really difficult to sit Isaiah Likely, but this is the exact same case as Mark Andrews. You can't trust these Baltimore Ravens pass catchers, even in a game against the Cincinnati Bengals that could be high scoring. This game plan is going to revolve around Derrick Henry and running the football because teams have had success running the ball against the Cincinnati Bengals. So, yeah, Isaiah Likely, Mark Andrews, both of them can be found on your bench this week. Both of them are outside of our top. I'm going to flip back to Mark Andrews quick. Yeah, I mean, they are our tight ends 19 and 20 this week, back to back in our consensus. So not looking great for those two this week. Ty, I'll let you bring it home for us here. Your tight end sit of the week, and we're also here with this player. To no surprise, can I say that?
To no surprise.
Unreal. Unreal.
That's what you get for the Hunter Henry shot. Yeah, Kyle Pitts is a sit. That's exactly what you get. Oh, man. All right, let's just take this week by week with Kyle Pitts, okay? Week 1, 3 catches, 3 targets, 26 yards, and a scramble touchdown from a one-legged Kirk Cousins. Tight end 4 on the week. Week 2, 3 catches, 4 targets, 20 yards against Philly. The tight end 21. Week 3 against the Chiefs, 2 catches, 5 targets, 59 yards. The tight end 13. 50 of those 59 yards came on one play because he got Nick Bolton in coverage on him. Okay. Then in week 4, 0 catches, 3 targets, 0 yards, tight end 53. And now he gets Tampa that has not allowed a single touchdown to tight ends this year in the bottom half of yards and catches allowed. Need I say more?
Yeah, the concerning thing with Kyle Pitts here is that they can't get him inside to block because that's not what Kyle Pitts does. They put him out on the outside. Can't win against cornerbacks in the NFL right now. It is like, it's not great. So why is he still my tight end 9 on the week? I don't know, because tight ends suck right now, and I'm willing to give him. I'm giving him one more week, like Mark Andrews. If it is another disappointing goose egg or 2-point fantasy point kind of week, like, yeah, Kyle Pitts is going to come plummeting down in my rankings, no doubt about it. So this is like last stand for Kyle Pitts here, and I am nervous it doesn't come through this week because, yeah, you can't play him inside, you can't block, can't play him outside because you can't win against cornerbacks. I hate to break it to you, Cameron, but I'll let you try and defend your flag plants here. But
I just want to say, like, how sad is it that he was tight end 4 week 1 with 3 catches, 26 yards, and a touchdown? I mean, 11.6 points, and he's a tight end 4. That's just, but that shows you how bad tight ends are. I just want to read this off because this is who Ty has decided to put ahead of Kyle Pitts this week.
Yes.
Tyler Conklin, Taysom Hill, Pat Freiermuth, Zach Ertz, and Kobe Parkinson. Brutal. Absolutely brutal. Now, I don't believe that you can put him. I think he's got still one of the higher upsides of all tight ends. I think he's still a top 10 tight end. I think you still are starting him this week.
Does he though?
Yes.
Does he have that
Yes.
upside?
He does have. He just has tremendous downside at the same time.
There it is. There
Because
it is.
his
That was
coach
a
hates
perfect
him.
comeback.
His coach hates him. That's why I'm gonna say
The
that
new
all year
coach.
long until I
4
can
weeks
trade him.
into the season, the new offensive coordinator, not even halfway through the season. Gosh, I hate Kyle Pitts.
Yes, I'm gonna keep saying it till I can trade him in our dynasty league. This is brutal. Nah, he hasn't looked good. Like, so I'll
No.
give you that. But at the same time, tight ends are just so atrocious that
Right.
we really shouldn't be calling anyone sits because odds are you just have nobody that you can start
Correct.
other than who's on your roster.
Right. Right. Which is why Kyle Pitts is still a top 10 tight end for me this week. It's
Yep.
like, could he catch a touchdown this week against a Tampa Bay defense or against a Tampa Bay offense that's been clicking on all cylinders recently, has been burying teams early? Yeah, totally. He could, if Kirk Cousins needs to throw, he could totally just fall into the end zone this week. But am I banking on it? No.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think the way you worded it is perfect, Cameron. With the upside comes tremendous downside. And that's just the reality. And Ty's like, I'm playing the downside, and you and I are both like, I'm giving the upside one more shot until he gives me another week like Mark Andrews, and it's see ya bye.
If we're chasing volume with tight ends, guess who's tied for 4th in targets
I don't even
from the
want to
tight
hear
ends
it.
position?
I know
don't
what
even
you're
wanna
going to say, and I don't want to
guess.
hear it.
It's Hunter Henry.
Oh, stop. We're going to wrap it up there for the week. Thanks for tuning in.
You know who's guy with Hunter Henry? Kate Otten. So, okay, we're not really saying much here.
That makes it
true?
even worse for
Yes.
Kyle Pitts.
Oh, no.
They're both 21 targets.
Oh, man.
Cole Kmet has 20.
Poor Kate Otten. That's not only the camera noise now, that is also the Kate Otten noise. You can follow us on the socials. FFFellas on Twitter, the FFFellas on Instagram, Fantasy Football Fellas on Facebook and YouTube. You can follow us on our personal socials. I am at Lucas Funsel on Twitter, Camlaw FFF for Cameron, Tyler _Plath for Tyler. Best of luck in your week 5 matchups. Again, if you are not subscribed already, make sure you do that and turn on that notification bell. We will be going live on Sunday. So make sure you catch our live stream where we will be answering all of your last minute start sit questions. Be back next week with, I believe we're switching to trending or ending next week. We're ditching the panic meter. Panic meters, we're starting to rinse and repeat too many names. So we're moving on to trending or ending. We'll have some more trade targets, and we'll talk about 24 more players who can change our week 6 outcome. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you all next time. Deuces.
Deuces.